These times we're living in, they're very interesting. And when I start to think about the solstice and the darkness and winter and how in summer it's easy to celebrate the solstice. Hang on, I got a dead battery here, or going dead. There. Hopefully that'll help. It's easy because we can, the sun is high in the sky and it's just easier to have happy moments even though we know that darkness is coming. But it takes a bravery to celebrate the coming of the dark and to be in the darkness, especially the way we are now. I mean, like you pointed out, Amanda, there's both the light and the dark. There's celebrating and being with the depth of darkness. We're only just going into winter, but the light is going to be increasing. But we have this opportunity. It depends on where we live, of course. I mean, in the northern hemisphere, so it's different in the southern hemisphere, but we know that the light comes back, but we have this opportunity. Maybe there's candles being lit, or like you were mentioning about fires, there's bonfires, and there's this kind of urging of the lightness to come closer. But oftentimes right behind that are like the tears, the depth of what we embrace in our lives. Our lives have so much joy and sorrow, and there's a kind of wisdom that the winter solstice can offer us, that the dark is inevitable and it comes into our lives no matter what. And after it leaves, it'll come again. And the light is also inevitable. But oftentimes it's the dark that we try to avoid. And this is what we train for in mindfulness meditation. We train for the dark. We see it all when we sit quietly with ourselves, watching our own breath. We see happy and then the sad, and we don't jump away from it. We sit and we notice it. And sometimes in our meditation, when we sit and there's dark that comes, there can be scary thoughts of pain, and there can be trauma arising in our being, and we can be with them, bring them all the way through as much as we can touch it. Sometimes we don't stay for long and we need to back up because it's difficult to look at. But instead of pushing the dark away or down, we can let it rise up and travel all the way through our beings. And it can be transmuted. It can be transmuted into love. Especially if we use the Brahma Vihara practices of having ourselves sit in kindness and compassion with ourselves as we go through whatever darkness arises. And we know that it comes, and we know that it's impermanent. We see that it's impermanent. And sometimes that can make it shine even more, that we celebrate the darkness when it arrives, and we appreciate the opportunity for winter. We appreciate the opportunity for reflection. there's the light blending, showing up in the dark. And, even though we're approaching the darkest day of the year and it's so dark outside, we can notice that there's this inner darkness, and it can happen any time of the year. Winter's the season that it's most likely to come up for a lot of people. But that kind of inner darkness can be sometimes anything from a mild despair or depression to a full-on dark night of the soul. And whatever the source or intensity, the darkness can be a challenge. I mean, sometimes it can just be hard to get out of bed in the morning, or hard to go for a walk, or hard to brush your teeth, or hard to reach out to a friend. And it can really consume us. Sometimes I call this a trip to the darkness island. And one of the biggest challenges can be this feeling that it's never going to end. And it's like feeling that spring is never going to come, and it doesn't matter, how often you look at the calendar or how many lectures you get on the movement of the earth around the sun, it still feels like things are hopeless. And there can be a kind of emotional, spiritual quicksand. But the good news is that Dharma practice helps us become more resilient. Whether it's like to the pandemic now, or relationships that might be ending, or days that we're grumpy in the depths of winter, when we're resilient, we know on a deep level of being that it's just a matter of time until it passes. And it's not really all that bad usually anyway. Sort of by using the Dharma, it's like we're wearing these anti-quicksand boots. And there are, I think, quite a few possible ways of looking at it through the Dharma. But I feel called to reflect upon, as I did a little bit in the sitting practice, of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. That, in plain English, that means that we find safety and respite in the possibility of awakening. There's the actual practice. That's the Dhamma, the truth of things. And the community of kindred spirits, the Sangha, wherever we find our Sangha. And by taking refuge, we touch into the heart, and we trust that the refuges hold us and protect us from sinking. That confidence in the practice. It's a kind of deep trust, like giving someone the keys to our home when we're gone. And the refuges provide us with direction, somewhere to channel our energies, our thoughts, our presence. When we drop into the actual practice of meditation or loving kindness, it's like putting on those anti-quicksand boots. And if we should find our boots aren't working so well, then we have the Sangha or the community ready to support us. In any case, the turn into winter isn't necessarily all gloomy. There's a lot of beauty and joy to be found. The light that we begin to see more and more the light that we're fanning within our hearts in our own practice. But in offering these simple reflections on the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, there's a chance that we can touch into a place of darkness this winter and maybe trust that there are refuges that we can lean into and that can brighten even our darkest days. That we don't need to pull away from that darkness, that we can be with it and know that it changes. I was going through some of my notes and I thought I'd read a couple of poems, just kind of go through here and there some thoughts on winter. And I have a couple of just sort of descriptions around dipping into the depth of sweet, yummy darkness. Inky black slide into mountainside stone and a slide into infinite space. The healing waters that surround mountain chains. This time of winter is signified by water in the elements. The dark winter, death, the depths, dying, the dark yin and passive, rest and renewal, the dark anima, the realm of the feminine. Sometimes I think that Catholics or mystics call Sophia, gateway to the soul. How this darkness initiation gives way to life, and how this wisdom teaches about changes, and that we can celebrate these many small deaths, the space that it creates, the room for new growth, ever onward in a long cyclical dance. And how this wisdom is fluid. And it has a necessity of every aspect in this continuum. This is a poem by Elinor Wylie. It's called Velvet Shoes. Let us walk in the white snow, in a soundless space, while footsteps quiet and slow, at a tranquil pace, under veils of white lace. I shall go shod in silk, and you in wool, white as white cow's milk, more beautiful than the breast of a gull. We shall walk through the still town in a windless peace. We shall step upon white down, upon silver fleece, upon softer than these. We shall walk in velvet shoes wherever we go. Silence will fall like dews on white silence below. We shall walk in the snow. And there's a poem by Mary Oliver called Snowy Night. It reminds us to pay attention and to be with what's present, whether we understand it or not. And it reminds us too of the ways we love this world and how to stay in wonder. Snowy Night by Mary Oliver. Last night, an owl in the blue dark tossed an indeterminate number of carefully shaped sounds into the world in which a quarter of a mile away I happened to be standing. I couldn't tell which one it was, the barred or the great horned ship of the air. It was that distant. But anyway, aren't there moments that are better than knowing something and sweeter? But anyway, aren't there moments that are better than knowing something and sweeter? Snow was falling, so much like stars filling the dark trees, that one could easily imagine its reason for being was nothing more than prettiness. I suppose if there were someone else's story, they would have insisted on knowing whatever is knowable, would have hurried over the fields, to name it, the owl, I mean. But it's mine, this poem of the night, and I just stood there, listening and holding out my hands to the soft glitter falling through the air. I love this world, but not for its answers. I love this world, but not for its answers. And I wish good luck to the owl, whatever its name. And I wish great welcome to the snow, whatever its severe and comfortless and beautiful meaning. I guess I'm thinking about snow since we had a little tiny bit of snow in Portland last night. Well, here's one more, and then we'll talk and I'll hear from you. This is another Mary Oliver poem, which I really like. It's the Buddha's last instruction. Make yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness, to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man, he lay down between two sala trees, and he might have said anything, knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward. It thickens and settles over the fields. Around him, the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs disattached in the blue air, I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something inexplicable, turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. Be a lamp unto yourself. Make yourself a light. So let's just sit for a few moments and let those words settle down as the shortest, well, now it's the shortest day of the year approaches. Even though we might not be feeling any love toward the cold dark of the winter solstice. But hopefully this poetry can help remind us of the beauty in all things, even in the frosty bitterness or raininess of December days. And may we find ways of providing ourselves with warmth and solidarity even when the wind blows, knowing that we can touch into the truths of the Dhamma, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Thank you for listening to the Dhamma.